Welcome to True Tales from the Other Side. If you have a true encounter with the unexplained that you want to share, contact us through the email address below. Enjoy.
At first glance, the Watts family was everything you'd expect from a quiet suburban dream. A spotless house in Colorado, two smiling little girls, a picture-perfect marriage. But behind that front door was something far darker. In just one night, a father would destroy everything. His wife, his children, and the illusion he spent years building. This isn't a story about a crime of passion. This is about something colder, calculated, hidden, and no one saw it coming. Sunday, August 12th, 2018. Shanann Watts returned home just before 2 a.m., dropped off by her friend Nicole Atkinson after a weekend business trip in Arizona. The doorbell camera on her own front porch recorded her walking into the house, luggage in hand, visibly tired, unaware it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. She was 15 weeks pregnant, expecting a baby boy. She'd already picked out his name, Nico. Hours later, silence. Shanann missed her 10 a.m. OB/GYN appointment, something completely out of character. She was meticulous with her schedule, especially now, especially with the baby. She didn't answer texts. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her friend Nicole tried calling again. Nothing. By early afternoon, alarm bells were ringing. Nicole drove to the Watts' home and began knocking. No answer. The garage door was closed. The house seemed still, too still. She called Chris. Chris was at work, or so he said. He told her Shanann had taken the girls, Bella and Celeste, to a friend's house for a play date. But his voice was off, detached, calm. Not the kind of calm that brings comfort, the kind that sends a chill down your spine. Nicole didn't buy it. She knew Shanann. She knew the girls, and none of this made sense. By 1:40 p.m., she called the police for a wellness check. When officers arrived, the scene was immediately suspicious. The front door was locked. No signs of forced entry. No movement inside. They contacted Chris again. This time, he came home. He let them in. And what they found inside only deepened the dread. Shanann's shoes, the ones she always wore, were by the door. Her purse was on the counter. Her medication, her suitcase, still by the stairs. Her phone, lifeline to her family and her work, was discovered tucked between couch cushions, abandoned. The car was still in the garage. So were the car seats. It was as if she vanished without ever leaving. Chris wandered the house with them, pointing to things, saying he didn't know, suggesting maybe she left through the back. Maybe she just needed space. But he wasn't asking questions. He wasn't calling her phone. He wasn't panicking. There was no shouting, no urgency, just a hollow man in a hollow house. As night fell, Shanann's family feared the worst. The woman who loved to share every moment of her life online had gone completely silent. Something was terribly wrong, and the man closest to her was already lying. I don't know where they are. By Tuesday, the story had gone public. Chris Watts stood in front of the family home, arms crossed tightly against his chest, rocking back and forth as local news cameras rolled. He wore a faded t-shirt, his voice soft, almost monotone. He stared into the lens and made a plea to a wife and daughters he already knew were dead. If you're out there, just come back. If somebody has them, just bring them back. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. The words sounded right, but the way he said them, off. There was no desperation in his voice, no tremble, no tears. Just a man calmly describing a nightmare as if it was a scheduling conflict. His hands never shook. His eyes never wandered. And that was the problem. When you're truly frantic, when you've lost your wife, your daughters, your unborn son, you don't stay composed. You break. You stumble over your words. You scream. You beg. Your eyes dart around looking for hope, scanning faces for signs. Chris's eyes stayed locked straight ahead. No one watching could feel what he was saying. Not his neighbors, not the reporters, not the investigators. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The facade was cracking. Behind the scenes, police had already started to close in. They noticed the inconsistencies in Chris's story, how his timeline kept shifting, how his details were vague, how his emotions felt more like placeholders than real feelings. They brought in cadaver dogs to search the house. The animals moved room to room, noses to the floor, tails stiff, alert. Then they hit on a scent, in the master bedroom, and again, in the garage, and then, unmistakably, in Chris's work truck. The implications were horrifying. Whatever happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, it had happened here. Chris said he didn't know where they were, but the house did. So did the dogs. And it was becoming clear that Chris Watts was not a grieving husband. He was a liar. And something far darker than anyone expected. The lie that couldn't hold Chris Watts tried to play the part. He stayed quiet, nodded solemnly, and stuck to his story. At least at first, but in just 2 days, that story began to splinter. First, he told police that Shanann had left the house with the kids. No note, no message, just gone. He said maybe she went to a friend's place. Maybe she needed space. Maybe everything was fine. Then, when that didn't hold up, when investigators pointed out her phone, her purse, her medication, her car, with the car seat still inside, he started shifting. Maybe she didn't leave with the kids. Maybe someone else took them. Maybe something happened while he was at work. It was clear he was grasping, trying to stay ahead of the tide. But the current was already pulling him under. So, detectives sat him down for a polygraph test. Before the test began, the examiner told him bluntly, "This is your last chance to tell the truth. If you had anything to do with their disappearance, it's going to come out." Chris nodded. Still calm, still confident. He failed. Badly. The results weren't even close. The examiner looked him in the eye and said, "Chris, you're not being honest. You already know what happened to your family, don't you?" And just like that, something inside him shifted. He asked for a break. And then he asked for his father. When his dad, Ronnie Watts, entered the interrogation room, Chris finally cracked. But not completely. With his head in his hands, eyes down, Chris began to spin a new version of the truth. Not the truth, his truth. He said he'd caught Shanann strangling their daughters, that in a fit of rage, he killed her, that it wasn't planned, that it wasn't murder, just blind emotion, a reaction. He cried as he said it, but it wasn't grief, it was fear, damage control. The detectives weren't buying it, and they didn't have to, because while Chris was rehearsing his version of events, they were already working on facts. They had pulled GPS data from his work truck. The morning Shanann supposedly vanished, Chris had left home around 5:27 a.m., just hours after she returned from her trip. But instead of heading straight to his normal job site, he drove to a remote oil storage facility called Survey 319, owned by Anadarko Petroleum, his employer. It was an isolated place. Flat dirt roads, tall tanks, miles from the nearest neighbor. The kind of place where no one could hear a scream. He stayed there for over an hour, then he drove back. Alone. No Shanann. No Bella. No Celeste. And now, the story he told didn't just have holes. It had a body count. The truth was bleeding through. Chris Watts had tried to fake grief, fake confusion, fake innocence. But he forgot something simple. Real fathers don't bury their children in oil tanks. Real husbands don't lie while their pregnant wives go missing. His performance was over. Now, investigators just had to dig up what was left of the truth, and the bodies he thought no one would ever find. Survey 319, August 16th, 2018. Just after sunrise, investigators followed Chris Watts' GPS data out to the desolate edge of Weld County, Colorado. Survey 319 was nothing but dirt roads and silence. No buildings, no cameras, no one around for miles. Just rust-colored soil, stiff dry grass, and the low hum of oil tanks cooking in the sun. This was where Chris had driven his work truck at 6:30 a.m. on Monday morning. He told his supervisors he was checking a leak, but detectives knew better. They parked near the site and began to walk the grounds. Within minutes, they saw it, a patch of disturbed dirt near the edge of the field. No grass, no rocks, just dry, broken soil that looked too freshly turned. The shape was subtle but deliberate. A rectangle, barely big enough for a body. They brought out cadaver dogs. The animals tensed and barked almost instantly. Beneath a few inches of earth, wrapped in a sheet, lay Shanann Watts. She was face down, her body partially curled from decomposition and pressure. She was still wearing the clothes she traveled in, a t-shirt, maternity leggings. Her skin had begun to change, but there was no mistaking her. She was 15 weeks pregnant. She had fought back, and she had been buried like garbage in a shallow grave by the man who once held her wedding vows. And it wasn't over. Just yards away stood two towering oil tanks, each looming over the field like silent sentinels. Gray, industrial, and sealed tight. When investigators opened the first hatch, the smell hit them before they saw anything. The stench of crude oil and death rising in thick, choking waves. Inside, floating in blackness, was the body of Celeste, the younger daughter, just 3 years old, her tiny limbs barely visible in the thick, toxic sludge. They opened the second tank. Inside was Bella, age 4. Her skin was blistered from the oil. Her lips were torn. She had bite marks on her tongue. An autopsy would later reveal the unimaginable. Bella had been alive when Chris smothered her sister. She watched it happen, and when he turned to her, she fought. Her last words were a whispered plea. "Daddy?" No. Chris had forced their small bodies, barely 40 pounds each, through an 8-inch hatch at the top of each tank. No easy task. Not a moment of panic. This was methodical. Calculated. He knew the oil would mask the smell. He knew the heat and chemicals would damage the remains. He thought no one would ever look there. Thought no one would find them. But they did. And now, no one would ever forget. Survey 319 was never just a job site. It became a burial ground. A place where a father tried to erase his entire family with oil, dirt, and silence. But in the end, the earth gave them back. And the lie Chris Watts built collapsed into something far worse than anyone imagined. Behind the mask. When the truth finally came out, it hit like a wave of ice. Even the most experienced investigators, men and women who had seen decades of violence, crime, and tragedy, were left shaken. Not because it was loud or grotesque, but because it was quiet. Chris Watts didn't explode in rage. He didn't snap. He simply decided. He told them everything, or at least enough. That early morning, shortly after Shanann came home from her business trip, they argued in the bedroom. She was emotional, tired, vulnerable. She suspected something. Maybe she already knew about the affair. Chris climbed on top of her, straddled her, pressed his hands around her neck. Shanann's last moments were a slow, agonizing blur. She begged. She struggled. She fought for the baby growing inside her. He didn't stop. He said later that she didn't scream, that it didn't take long. And then she was gone. He sat in silence, staring at what he had done. And that's when he heard the small footsteps behind him. 4-year-old Bella stood in the doorway, blinking sleep from her eyes. She looked at her father, then at her mother, motionless on the bed, a sheet beginning to cover her. "What's wrong with Mommy?" she asked. Chris didn't panic. He didn't break down. "She's just sleeping," he told her. Then he went into autopilot. Cold. Robotic. He wrapped Shanann's body in the sheet, dragged her down the stairs, and loaded her into the back of his truck. Then he got the girls ready. He buckled Bella and Celeste into their car seats. They didn't know any better. They brought blankets, snacks, a stuffed animal. Then he drove 45 minutes through open Colorado plains, just Chris, 2 daughters, and their mother's corpse in the back. At some point, Celeste, the younger one, just 3, dozed off in her seat. Bella didn't. She stayed awake the entire drive, watching, thinking, and maybe beginning to understand. At Survey 319, the oil site where Chris worked, he parked the truck beside the 2 giant storage tanks. There, in the shadow of industry, he carried Shanann's body into a shallow grave he had dug earlier, a plan already in motion. Then he came back for the girls, one by one. He took Celeste first, while she slept, and smothered her with a blanket. No screaming, no fight. Then came Bella. But Bella did fight. Small as she was, she knew. She screamed. She kicked. She bit through her tongue. Her final words, spoken to the man she trusted most in the world. "Daddy, no." That moment, a child's last breath taken by her father's hand, wasn't just heartbreaking. It was evil in its most chilling form. Not loud, not fast, but slow, intentional, face to face. Chris Watts didn't just murder his family. He erased them, one at a time, while fully aware, fully in control. It wasn't a blackout. It wasn't a moment of rage. It was a decision, made with clear eyes and steady hands. And once the mask slipped, there was nothing behind it. No remorse, no breakdown, just vacancy. A hollow man who smiled in family photos while imagining how to wipe them clean from his life. And for a while, no one saw it. But monsters don't always live in shadows. Sometimes they sleep in your bed. And so we do it. Why? After his confession, Chris Watts gave a reason, if you could call it that. He said he felt trapped, that life with Shanann had become too much, that the weight of family, fatherhood, responsibility, it all closed in on him like a coffin. He said he didn't love her anymore, that he couldn't breathe, that he just wanted out. But he didn't ask for a divorce. He didn't leave. Instead, he started an affair with a coworker. He told her he had no kids, told her he was separated. He sent her love songs, took her to restaurants, looked her in the eyes while pretending his daughters didn't exist. Meanwhile, Shanann was posting videos about their new baby on the way, and Chris was Googling how to start a new life. The truth is, Chris didn't want a fresh start. He wanted a clean slate. No questions, no custody battle, no judgment from friends or family. He thought he could delete his family like clearing a browser history. Kill the wife, kill the kids, bury the bodies, go back to work, like nothing happened. And that's what haunts people most. Not just the horror of what he did, but how he did it. No rage, no blood-soaked frenzy. Just calm, deliberate. He strangled Shanann in bed, put the bodies in the truck, and clocked in for work like it was just another Monday morning. The brutality was chilling, but the silence, worse. The house left behind. After the trial ended, after Chris Watts was handed 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, the house sat in eerie stillness. The lawn went untended. Mail stopped arriving. Realtors whispered about what to do with it. Neighbors avoided eye contact with the windows. There was a heaviness that hung over the property, as if the walls had soaked in the screams, the pleading, the final breaths, and refused to let them go. Some said it was psychological, just the weight of knowing. Others weren't so sure. One neighbor said the porch light flickered for weeks, even when the bulb was changed. Another claimed their dog refused to walk past the driveway, whimpering and pulling at the leash. Then came the stories. Shadows seen, moving across the upstairs window. A child's giggle heard near the front steps, late at night when no one was around. A motion light triggering in the backyard, even though no one was there. Inside, the pastel nursery remained untouched for months. The crib, the baby clothes, the name Nico, still written on a chalkboard above the dresser. Eventually, the furniture was removed, the walls repainted, the space sterilized. But the air inside still felt wrong, heavy, sad, like the house knew and wouldn't let go. Evil next door. The part that people can't shake, the part that lingers, is this. Chris Watts didn't look like a killer. He wasn't the man you cross the street to avoid. He wasn't the face on a wanted poster. He was the dad next door, the one who waved as you pulled in groceries, the one who smiled, mowed his lawn, played with his kids, polite, quiet, normal. But behind that face was nothing. No empathy, no guilt, no humanity, just vacancy. That's what makes it terrifying. Evil doesn't always storm through the door in the middle of the night. Sometimes it lives with you, tucks your children in, kisses your forehead, sends good morning texts, and then one day, it decides you're in the way. They never had a chance. Shanann never saw it coming. Neither did Bella. Neither did Celeste. They trusted him. They loved him. They were his. And he chose to end their lives, to make room for a fantasy. No matter how many years pass, people still drive by that house and feel a chill, a shiver, a strange pressure in their chest. They still lower their voices when they speak of what happened there. And now, the house stands quiet. But not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that watches you from the upstairs window. The kind that remembers. The kind that waits. Because when evil finally shows its face, it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers.
Thanks for listening. Remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next set of tales from the other side. Submit your story to the email below. And remember, nothing is what it seems.